We're all here. I'm just going to wait one more minute. Welcome everybody. I hear the bells. They're sound so beautiful in Shepherd Tower, Breslin Tower, and I just want to welcome everybody here tonight. My name is Susan Askew. I'm class of '86. And I am the Associate Vice President for Alumni and Parent Programs. And I just have to say, we so miss being with you all for Family Weekend and hosting you all here. And we also miss seeing you out on the road at Sewanee Club events across the country. And so since we can't be with you all in that way, we're just so grateful that you are willing to be with us this way, because as we all know, this is a semester unlike any other. And there's just been no handbook to follow. Everything's new for you all and new for us. And so this is a way for us to be able to clarify some things and just communicate with you on a regular basis. And so thank you all so much for being here. And our goal hasn't changed, you guys. We want to stay here on campus learning till November 20th. And some of the questions that were submitted didn't quite align with that. And so they're still valid questions. And so we want to get answers for you all on that and some clarity. And speaking of questions, I got a ton of, and I would say half of them had to do with one topic. And if the Vice Chancellor doesn't cover this in his remarks, it will be the first question I ask him. So stay tuned for that. And also, speaking of all those questions, if your question was maybe not as broad appealing to most parents, it may not get asked here, but I still want to answer it for you. So I will follow up if you feel like your question didn't get answered. But I heard earlier this week, the Vice Chancellor said we were halfway there, and there's lots of good news that goes with that. So we've got some colleagues here on this call that will chime in if we need to, but and I'm thankful they're here, but I'm going to turn it over and get started with Vice-Chancellor Brigety.
Thanks, Susan, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to join you here for our periodic series of webinars with our parents to give you the latest information as well as perspectives from where we sit on how things are going, and answer any questions you may have to the very best of our abilities. I'm also pleased to be joined by Acting Vice President for Risk Management, David Ships, who is our day-to-day point person for managing our overall COVID response, as well as Chef Rick, who manages our Sewanee dining services and is an institution here because there are always questions about food. So I'm delighted to have Chef Rick here join us. So let me kind of give you a sense of more or less where we are and try to begin to answer some of the questions that came in over email and internet in the days leading up to this. So one, as Susan said, we are almost halfway there. Hump Day is officially October 5th. That is our official halfway point in terms of keeping people here and completing our truncated in-person semester. And thus far, touch wood, it has gone very well. Due to the incredible planning that our team did all summer long, and the operationalization of that plan by David Ships and his team, we have a very robust testing regime that has allowed us to have very good visibility on the presence of the virus in the student population, as well as some members of our staff. And the numbers are extraordinary. They are thus far, I think, in the single digits in terms of people that have, students that have been infected, none that have been hospitalized. And as you may know, we had a bit of an outbreak about 2 weekends ago, and we were able to catch it very rapidly, precisely because of our testing regime, which allows us to test every student once a week and have those results back in a matter of hours. That also obviously dramatically aids our contact tracing efforts. And so it's been extraordinary. And so that is the good news. The challenges are, one, the fact that we are here 6 weeks in and our numbers are so low is evidence that what we are doing is working. It is not an indication that we should ease up on any of the restrictions that we have, because everything that we're doing demonstrates that that we are actually being successful in our approach, even as other universities have seen large outbreaks of the virus in their student population, and have had to, in some cases, quarantine the entire student body in their dorms for 2 weeks, or just shut down. And so this is a really extraordinary thing. I should also say that notwithstanding all the measures that we have in place as an institution, things like our testing regime, our contact tracing, our increased cleaning of facilities and whatnot. One of the big factors, one of the big challenges is human compliance. And so amongst our students, I would say anecdotally, we have a good 85% of the students that are consistently trying to do the right thing. We have some, I would guess, some smaller subset, 10, 15%, thereabouts, that don't, and that have willfully disobeyed a series of rules that put all of their classmates at risk. Whether that is very early on in the semester, some students who snuck away down to University of Alabama for a frat party at Tuscaloosa on a Saturday, and that Monday, the university announced 500 COVID cases, and they had 1,000 by the end of that week. To some students that are having unannounced parties and whatnot. Now, what I would say is that things are getting better as students continue to encourage their peers to adhere to the guidelines. And as we've continued to message the fact that if we cannot stay here throughout the course of this semester, then it's hard to see how we can return in the spring. And so we are hopeful that messaging will continue. I should also say, so I think probably the number one question Susan was going to sort of say, she's going to ask about masking. Is that right? It's not masking. All right, fine. Well, I'll get to that. Well, let me talk about masking since we're on it. And because I understand that this is a question for many parents, what exactly is the policy with regard to masking? The policy is very simple. You need to wear a mask unless the following things are true. Unless you are asleep, unless you are alone in a room, unless you are within like further than 6 feet apart from anybody else, or unless you're actively eating or drinking. And when in doubt, you should wear a mask. So, for example, my wife and I take a walk most mornings before the day gets started, and when very few people are around, and we wear masks when we're walking around. I'm not wearing a mask right now because I'm alone in my office. You see Chef Rick wearing a mask because he's in a public space. And David Ships, I think, is not, and Susan are wearing masks because they are similarly alone in their offices as we are. And so that's what we are telling students. It's very simple. If you're asleep in your dorm room, you don't have to wear a mask. If you're actually eating food on the quad and you're 10 feet away from your friends, don't wear a mask, but put your mask back on. And because we know that it is one of the things that stops the transmission of the virus, especially indoors. And so masks are required inside all academic buildings, regardless of whether or not you are alone. And for example, if you're studying the library or if you're in a classroom, it's something of that nature. And so that's critical in order to prevent the spread of the disease. There's also been a series of questions, my understanding is about visiting, whether or not parents or others can visit the domain because they are aware of other parents visiting the domain. Let me be clear about this. We have not changed our policy. The university is officially closed to visitors. It's very important that people stay away unless it is necessary as defined by getting permission from us in order to come to campus. And let me explain why that is. So everybody assumes they're being careful. and no one thinks they're infected unless they are. But we know that the virus continues to spread, especially here in the southern United States. And it is entirely possible for the virus to spread from wherever somebody is traveling to their student who is here, for that student to contract it when they're hugging a parent or when they're otherwise in close proximity, sharing a meal across the table for each other for an hour or whatever. And then if that student contracts it, then it's possible for the student to sort of spread it back in a dorm room or a sorority house or something else like that. And then it takes off like wildfire. And so I completely understand that it is a sacrifice to ask parents to stay away from the domain, generally speaking, and away from their students. But it really is absolutely necessary in order for us to protect the bubble and to prevent the introduction of the virus into our population. And then the final broad area I will address is with regard to thinking about the spring. And then I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. So we intend to open for the spring semester. We are planning for that eventuality, that hoped for eventuality. We do not yet know for sure when we'll open or if. And let me explain to you our thinking behind that. The first is we do not yet know that we can make it through this semester. As they say, we're halfway through. We hope we're through the hardest part, and we hope that we're going to make it all the way through. But it is vitally important, as I say, that we don't take our foot off the gas and that everybody continue to hold fast through the end of the semester. Because if we do, then we kind of know what it takes in order to remain open. If we have to evacuate prior to that, particularly if we have to evacuate because the virus spreads as a direct result of lack of adherence to our health guidelines, then it'll be very difficult for us to conceptualize how we can bring people back, because the issue will not be that our plan was not adequate. The issue would be a lack of compliance. So we simply have to be able to prove that we can remain open this fall in order to open in the spring. Now, that said, assuming we can, and thus far, touch wood, the signs are hopeful, if not encouraging. Then the question is, when are we going to do it? Because a large part of our strategy thus far, that it's allowed us to make it this far into the semester, has been our reliance on the outdoors as an ally for our approach to combating the spread of this virus. Whether it be, for example, having a series of tents around campus that are wired for IT so we can actually do classes outside, to having all of our Greek life parties be outside as opposed to inside Greek houses, to having a series of other people just being able to hang out on the quad with their friends. That will not be available to us in January. Certainly not like we're doing it right now. And we know traditionally the respiratory viruses spread in the winter months because that's when people are closer together. And so we are trying to assess, assuming we're able to come back, what is the best timing in the calendar to be able to do that, and what are the implications of that for the timing of the rest of the semester, for things like spring break, how far we have to go into the summer months, all these sorts of things. So that thinking is well underway, and we are hopeful that it will yield a specific approach in the coming weeks. The third issue is we don't yet know for certain what the outlook is going to be in the spring semester. So assuming that we make it through this fall, and assuming that we have a plan for coming back in the spring at a certain date, and we're able to kind of work through the semester, it is possible that we could have some other kind of shock that we don't yet anticipate. That we see the double whammy of a flu pandemic on top of the coronavirus pandemic, and that just spreading like wildfire in certain regions of the country. And we have to be flexible to be able to respond to this profound set of unknowns, the known unknowns, as Secretary Rumsfeld, I think, once said. So these are the challenges. But having said all that, We are planning to reopen. That is our intention, assuming that we have sufficient compliance with our public health guidelines, that we're able to remain open, and assuming there's not some other exogenous shock that we have to account for in our planning for the spring. So those are our initial thoughts on matters, and I'm more than happy to take your questions on anything you'd like to discuss. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that update. And I'm going to circle back on some of those topics with questions, but I promised I would ask this question first, which really, I would say half of the parents who asked a question want to know, and it's a yes or no question, but I'd love you to elaborate. Do the students have to move out in November?
Oh, that was the $1 million question. Yes. And let me explain to you why that is the case. So, first of all, as I say, we don't know that we're going to make it to November. We hope so. Things are looking good, but we're not certain that is going to be the case. Second, as I mentioned, even presuming that we're all able to remain here through November 20th, we are planning for a return for the spring semester at a yet to be determined date. But it is entirely possible, as I mentioned, that for some yet unforeseen reason that may not be possible, probably health related, but something else. And the third possibility is that even if we plan for return to the spring, and even if we're able to effectuate that, it is also possible that an individual student may not be able to return for the spring. Because she or he may contract the coronavirus while they're back home, meeting up with their friends from University of Alabama or Chapel Hill or wherever else. And in each of those scenarios, what would happen is that the university essentially would be responsible and accountable for the upkeep of the personal possessions of all these students while they're gone for potentially an extended period of time. And I will tell you, I was not here, but I've heard the stories when we had to evacuate the mountain in short order in the spring. And there were a few students who, for whatever reason, couldn't, and their things remained in dorms for a matter of weeks, and we ultimately had to sort of move them out, whatever. And then there was some not pleasant interactions and implications of students wondering about what happened to their belongings or where things were or whatnot. And if I take that eventuality and multiply it by 1,500 or 1,700, that's not a good thing for anybody, not for the university and not for the students or some subset thereof. And so while I recognize that it is an inconvenience, perhaps even a significant inconvenience, it's the better option and one for the best well-being of everyone involved. So that's why.
Thank you. Back to the visitors on campus, and we understand that parents really are not, we just have to wait it out. But there are other people that come to campus out of our control, really. And I think there's a little bit of a rub in that situation. Can you help explain how we can let random people from Nashville or Atlanta or wherever come and eat at Shenanigans or hike, but a parent cannot visit?
It's a fair question. They're kind of slightly different scenarios. Let's talk first about the village. There's no doubt that notwithstanding all of the planning and arrangements we've done, that we are handicapped in creating a perfect bubble in a variety of ways. The first is that notwithstanding all the efficacy, all the data on the efficacy of masks, there is not a masking requirement in the state of Tennessee. Neither is there a masking requirement in Franklin County. So municipalities can issue ordinances, but our municipality has not, and we don't have the power to do that as an unincorporated town. And so neither, of course, do we have the legal authority to shutter businesses or otherwise materially interfere with their business operations. And so with regard to all of the merchants in the village, we have been in ongoing conversations with them to strongly encourage them to follow the Sewanee masking mandate and to encourage their patrons to do so as well. Those conversations have proceeded with varying degrees of success. There are some merchants who are happy to ask all their employees to mask themselves and require all their patrons to mask when they're not actually eating. There are other patrons, other businesses that are not willing to insist that all of their employees mask. And there's still others that simply don't want to, kind of post a sign and say you need to mask, but don't want to create the level of tension between their patrons and their staff, which is a sentiment on the one hand, I certainly understand some perspective on, given some of the very ugly interactions that have taken place around the country when food service workers or others have asked patrons to mask, and it's gotten really quite contentious. But from my perspective and from the university's perspective, if we have visitors that are coming from all over the place and people are not masking and they're coming and they're having beers and they're there for long periods of time, and we know from what we've seen in other places across the country that restaurants can be a very serious vector for the spread of restaurants and bars can be a serious vector for this disease. It's a real problem, and we have told our students this as well. Now, what I could do, meaning that it is possible to do it, not that it is wise or advisable. What I could do is make the village off limits to students. Then say, like, we're going to draw the boundary of the bookstore. You can't go anywhere further than that. I don't want to do that for a variety of reasons. One is I don't want to. One is I think it would be challenging to enforce, even if we did it. And two, I don't want to break faith with our merchants who are here for the long haul. But it is absolutely concerned, and yes, it absolutely calls into question the notion, well, how can the Tullahoma Motorcycle Club come up and grab beers at Shenanigans and drive down University Avenue, but I can't drive from Nashville to come see my daughter? And what I would tell you is that we are doing our very best to limit the external contacts that are coming here, because every single person who comes is another vector for the virus. And let me say this as well. I mean, this is obviously everybody looks at this entire problem set from their own perspective. The students want to be with their friends and study. The parents are obviously concerned about the well-being of their students and want to spend time with them and see them in their new natural environment and whatnot. But as someone who is tasked with taking a look at the totality of the picture, the implications of a spread of this virus and our necessity to evacuate and not be able to return are profound. In addition to the fact that students will have, for us, as the only option to study online and not be able to return until likely there's a virus or until we have some other pathway of bringing people back, a vaccine rather. The economic consequences for the university and crucially for our employees and for our partners in the community will be significant, beyond significant. And so while I recognize that these are all challenges and sacrifices we're asking people to make, I can tell you that from the macro picture, the upside benefit is substantial. And so I implore you to help us and do your part to help us keep the bubble as tight as we can and help us to make it through this semester.
Well said. And just to throw in an additional, it was not insignificant to close the Sewanee Inn and all the local Airbnb. So, I mean, you're doing as much as we can do. So thank you. One more on that topic, which is, I think parents really are proud of their students for trying to follow the rules, but want to understand why faculty and staff can leave campus.
So there are two reasons. The first is that in many, if not most cases, I actually haven't seen the data if it's most or not, but certainly in many cases, faculty and staff don't live on campus. And so they need to be able to come to work and go. And we have been adamant that they follow the public health protocols that we've put in place, both while they're here, and strongly encourage them to do so in their personal life as well. But here's the other really important reason. We know from looking at nursing homes, cruise ships, combatant vessels, and other universities that one of the epicenters for the spread of the disease are close living quarters. And so, hypothetically, if a faculty member contracts the coronavirus from her spouse who contracted it somehow, they contracted it at home, she comes, she teaches her class, she's wearing a mask while she's teaching the class, she's teaching outdoors, she's more or less socially distant. The likelihood of transmission in that environment is comparatively small. But if a student gets coronavirus and is hanging out with his fraternity brothers in their frat house, or is hanging out with their buddies in the common room of their dorm, the likelihood for it to spread and sustained spread is much higher. So a way to think about it is that the students are really, by virtue of their living arrangements, are almost like Tinder, waiting for a spark, much more so than faculty members that go around. Now, I will say, so my wife, as you know, is a critical care physician, and we did a webinar for the community last Friday, I think, in which she shared much of her expertise, because she spent the last 6 months fighting COVID in ICU in the capital area region. And there's a reason why you see, for example, so-called kind of family clusters of the spread of this disease. Someone goes to a wedding, there's a family event, everyone's kind of related or close thereof. It takes root in a family group, and there you have it. And so our students here essentially are so many family groups around sports teams, around fraternity houses, around themed houses, in ways that faculty and staff are not.
Thank you. And sort of along those lines, moving on though to a testing question, and while students are tested weekly, can you share the plan for faculty and staff testing?
Sure. Actually, why don't I ask David Ships to talk that, so he doesn't have to correct me with any sort of small detail I may get wrong. So we'll cut out the middleman and go straight to him. David, shoot.
Right. So, the approach, it's about the strategy, right? So our strategy, to complement what the Vice Chancellor just described, our strategy is to keep, first and foremost, the student body safe and free of the disease. And so that directly ties into how you test. So as an example, there are many, many employees at the university who have zero contact with students. And so from a strategic standpoint, it doesn't make sense to test 100% of the employee body. It does make sense to test those employees that have regular contact with the students. So for example, Chef Rick's team, the dining staff, the custodial staff, and to some extent the faculty. I think as a practical matter, faculty teaching with all parties masked, and sometimes outside, sometimes in a classroom, the risk of transmission is quite low. And so While we don't want to rely on that, and we do test faculty, the frequency is testing students weekly is tied directly to our strategy as a result of that communal living. And so that's how we've designed the testing approach. And if you watch or keep an eye on the metrics that we post each morning on the website, you'll get a good indication of the extent to which we are testing both parties each day. So I hope that helps.
Great update. Thank you. I know you said that we are full steam ahead planning for the spring. There's a couple questions about sports as it relates to that. And I know we have no idea, but do you know if the fall sports would get lumped into the spring if we are able to have athletics?
Sure. So when our conference had this discussion, the original decision to cancel athletics, the plan was to petition the NCAA to allow essentially a flipped season. So to allow our fall sports to compete this spring, which we know would place a stress on some athletic facilities and whatnot, but is better than losing an entire season, assuming that we're allowed to do that. So there are kind of two elements to this. The first is getting permission from the NCAA to do that. I suspect that that would be forthcoming, although it may not be for reasons to which I'm not privy. And then the other is whether or not, based on everything that we're seeing, it's prudent to do so. So for example, I suspect we're going to learn a lot by watching both major league sports, NFL and NBA, as well as Division I football play this fall. We're going to learn a lot about how the virus is transmitted in athletic competitions between teams that have otherwise not been in contact with each other. And I suspect that will play a significant role in our collective decisions about whether or not it is safe or advisable to resume intercollegiate sports.
Great. I know you answered the main question about moving out in November, if we can make it. And you may not know these details about it, but would people be able to leave campus to put their stuff in storage? Will the move out be staggered? Do you know any kind of details? Maybe David might know too.
David, do you want to take that?
Sure. The move out in November, Susan. Yes. So it'll obviously, given where the date is, Friday the 20th being the last day of school or the last day of classes, it'll have to be a pretty compressed move out period because of the fact that it is right up against Thanksgiving. And so details are certainly forthcoming from Student Life, but I would expect it to be a fairly compressed and active move out period.
Great, thank you for that. And we'll just stay tuned with more details. Will the students get flu shots this semester?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, Chef Rick, I'm gonna call on you probably for this, but there have been some more questions about the food, and many people said how awesome it has been improved, and there's so many options now as far as locations go. But can you just bring them up to speed on all your great offerings?
Sure. Actually, I'm coming to you right now from Craven's Dining Hall. It's our annex dining hall at Craven's Hall. And I've had about 150 students come through. The Craven's Hall functions as a different concept than the main dining hall. It's an on-demand food hall. So the students can actually take control over their meal and design it. Tonight we're featuring ramen bars and made-to-order paninis and sandwiches. The ramen bar is really popular. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to, if I can show you where I am here. This is in Craven's. And as you can see, the students move through, and some are choosing to stay and eat. Many are taking their food to go. And Craven's has really been quite successful, particularly for those students that live on this side of campus. And then, of course, we have the Tiger Bay Pub, which is open 5 days a week, and it's dedicated completely to the board plan. We serve about 700 meals a day in the Tiger Bay Pub. We have meal equivalencies at both of our retail units, and we feed about 600 meals at Sterling's daily, and just a little under that at the Cup and Gown. In addition to the dining hall, where we're seeing a lot more participation than we have in previous years. And it's really interesting to me because I track these numbers pretty closely, that we're actually serving more than we normally would. And I attribute this to the fact that we're maintaining the bubble. Students are staying on campus and they're taking all their meals in the dining plan. It's been a challenging semester, and we've been challenged to build capacity and resources to meet the demand. But I think I think we've kind of flattened the curve of discontent, as I like to call it. And it seems like the students are much happier, and we're addressing literally every student individually on their needs and wants. That being said, there's still several weeks to come, and we don't have bad weather yet. And so when that bad weather comes, we're prepared for that. We have seating and seating opportunities so everyone can dine in. We also have a shuttle that runs lunch period right now, but can be expanded if we need it, from main campus to Cravens Hall once the weather gets bad. But right now, the students seem to be pretty happy with coming in. They're streaming in right now. We're about to get our big rush in Cravens. We typically serve about 300 meals in Cravens at night, about 200 at lunch, and just under 100 at breakfast. So that's kind of the update. We're anxious to obviously get back to normal, but we're prepared to do what we need to do to take care of our student body. And as far as the holiday season that's coming up in November, we'll be here feeding students as long as we need to be here feeding students. So if it takes longer longer than we envision for students to move away, I've been talking to Marichelle, our Dean of Students, about this. Dining will support and take care of our students as best we can. So, and I'm masked because I'm counting students tonight in Cravens, and I'm in a public area, as the Vice-Chancellor mentioned earlier. And just trying to get a good handle on Cravens and how it's being participated in. It seems to be a very popular venue, and we do have plans for some late night activities with student activities and residential life later on, starting this weekend.
Great, thank you for all that. I know y'all have worked hard, and you're even doing some pop-up shops and bringing.
Oh yeah, we do thank you, Susan. There's so much going on. I forgot about the pop-ups. So we do pop-ups, which is essentially exactly that. We show up on at different locations on campus. We announce it just a few minutes before we show up, and the kids get kind of excited about it. And it's called a pop-up because we use pop-up tents to set up, and we do some really edgy, innovative food, and it's been real popular. We typically get about 300 to 400 people at those pop-ups, and it also fills a need. And one of the things that we're trying to do is, create an atmosphere that keeps the students on campus. And this is a struggle we all have. It's got to be very difficult to be a college student and not be able to move about freely and be confined. So we're doing everything we can to make it at least exciting and have opportunities. And that includes the food trucks that come to campus almost every day and the delivery services that are available. There really are a lot of options for the students. And we intend to provide more as we move through into the semester.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. This one, Vice Chancellor, can you give an update on the cell tower?
Shit, that's you. Where we are. David.
Cell tower underway. There are, we're in what I would describe as the last series of steps with regard to the Historical Preservation Society, Tennessee Historical Preservation Society, and having a final sort of determination on where the tower will be placed, which is in the rear area of the tailgate parking lot of the football field. And we are working diligently to establish a COLT, which is a temporary solution for Verizon users specifically. Cell on Light Truck is what that stands for. The recent hurricanes have those vehicles prioritized elsewhere, but we still have a standing order with hopes to have that COLT arrive while at least students are still on campus and as much as we can. And I suspect from a timing standpoint, we should see that the permanent tower, which is going to be a monopole in the back of that area of the football parking lot, we're expecting Q1. The earlier in Q1, the better. Obviously, the goal was to do as much as we can this calendar year, but certainly to be prepared when students return next semester. So hopefully the pieces will continue to fall in place to keep to the timeline that's been established.
Great, thank you. I have a little bit of an update if someone doesn't have a better one, but I think on the last webinar, we learned that they were going to relax the rules in the dorms and let people visit dorms through a process using QR codes so they could kind of track them. Does anybody know the update on that?
So first of all, that is a student initiative that came to us, and then we said, that makes sense. That was proposed very early, maybe even like just before the school year started or right after, or something like that, I can't remember. My understanding is we're waiting for them to finish that. Is that right, David? Yeah. So
That's correct. Sorry.
we could launch tomorrow if they had finished their work. So we're still waiting for them. And I should also say as well, I welcome that initiative. It came out of a series of, open dialogues between the students and the administration to solve a very practical need. And it's vital for us to be able to contact trace if there is an outbreak. And so we are moving at the speed that we can.
Yes, I did learn today that they're in the testing phase this week. So I think it's probably any day now. That'll be a very welcome option for people. Someone's asking where to get gas in their car, and I would usually just reply individually to them, but it's such an easy question. Yeah, Sewanee has a downtown gas station. They'll even have a mechanic on site there. So your son can get his gas downtown Sewanee. There's been a couple questions after the article that was in the Sewanee Purple about the SPO.
Yeah.
Can you share anything about that?
Sure. So as you may know, I meet with student leaders once a week, every Friday at 2 o'clock in Chin Hall for an hour and a half. And I had been aware of the challenge at the SPO for some time. And so the SPO is student run. And so I have said for weeks now, in principle, I'm happy to consider another alternative to make it run more smoothly. Come to me with recommendations, to me personally through my staff, and we'll sort it out, as we have done on any number of other issues. I have yet to get a response. And so, but I know it's an issue. It's certainly an issue for those intrepid, dogged workers who work there, student workers who work there. And so I'm happy to entertain alternative options for how we might do it. And so I'm looking forward to getting some proposals. Susan, you're muted.
So sorry. So as we're talking, still looking forward to the spring, can you just, I know none of those details are mapped out, but what would happen on campus between now and then? And if people decide based on this semester that or maybe that there are not spring sports, that they will want to study remotely, is there a different tuition for those people?
No. First of all, tuition represents the cost of instruction. And the cost of instruction is actually higher this semester than it has been previously, in large measure because of the series of IT upgrades we've had to make in order to make online instruction possible. And I would note that we have not raised tuition, nor have we raised tuition or passed on the cost of testing onto students and their families, notwithstanding the fact that it is extremely expensive to do so. So we very much hope that if we deem it both safe and plausible to return in the spring, that students will elect to do so, regardless of what may be happening with spring sports. I suspect as well that when students get home for the holidays and they compare their experiences here at Sewanee with the experiences of their peers at other institutions, either that who went to places that were online exclusively or had to shut down halfway through, notwithstanding all of the various restrictions that we have here that make life more challenging, I am confident that their experiences here will stack up more positively than that of many of their peers, and therefore I hope they'll love to come back.
Great. Yes, and I did hear from a lot of parents, and their students are very happy to be here, but we do know that there are probably some who are not doing as well, maybe missing friends that aren't here or missing more freedom than they're used to having. And so we've had a couple questions about our proactivity in looking after students like that, and maybe a difficulty getting appointments at the wellness center. Do you have anything you can add to that to explain?
Sure. I mean, so first of all, even absent COVID, we know that student mental health is a very important issue. We authorized the hiring of a new counselor this summer. So we have already increased our capacity, both for students who are here and also who can have online counseling services as well. I wish we could have a 0 wait time for counseling services. It's for people that prefer or want to have in-person counseling. It's just hard. I mean, if I could hire 5 more counselors and convince them to come have life here on the mountain, we would do so. It has been incredibly challenging, not simply since I've been here, but previously, to fix this problem in terms of improving counseling services for in-person counselors here, but we're continuing to work on it. I can tell you I've had, personally, a number of parents reach out to me with concerns about their own particular student, either would be just kind of generally adjustment issues or whatnot. And we've routed all of those people personally to make sure that they have the personal attention that they need, because we are very concerned. They want to make sure that they are as healthy and as happy as possible, particularly in this environment. I know that our student life folks are working literally around the clock, addressing various needs of our students to ensure that their health is taken care of.
Thank you for that. And I did reach out to the director, and she said that while there is a wait list for individual therapy, people can come in same day for walk-in appointments, and they will see them for one session and then be added to the wait list for a longer appointment. But I don't know if in the parents newsletter that went out under the website find section, I shared their social media accounts, the University Wellness Center's social media accounts, and it's incredible all the things they are offering. And not only through there, but through the residential life system with the proctors and the area coordinators. And then they've even reached out to faculty and staff to ask them to be on the lookout and report students who might need some assistance. So I have some questions about what do you find most interesting since you've arrived here?
Well, I will tell you, I mean, so COVID, obviously, as the Zoom call demonstrates, makes it harder to just make human connections. But I've tried very hard to get out and about, to meet students where they are. I mean, so I've visited a couple of classes and just hang out with them in class, and gone to a stats class or whatever. I have met with all the sorority and fraternity presidents, as I did this past Monday. I just, like an hour ago, just was out at the university farm, not just like this. I had my farm clothes on, helping to pull plastic over a greenhouse with about 20 other students, and it's much harder than it looks. Thank you very much. Some of them invited me to go out camping with the Sewanee outdoor program, which I will do. And so, these sorts of things, I think it's just really great getting to know students. I've done a number of one-on-one with students that are interested in career advice, particularly as it relates to international affairs. We've, had international students over at Chen Hall for Ethiopian breakfast. And so, I'm just really fascinated by their stories, and I really enjoy getting to know them.
That is one of the perks of working here, for sure. There's somebody that is asking a lot of questions, and they're anonymous, but they seem to really be concerned about penalties and maybe what would constitute the student to be getting in trouble. Like if the parent shows up at shenanigans and happens to see their student there, will the student get in trouble? If it's, I think it's the same person, if they're in another dorm, will they get in trouble? So anyway, is there a way to talk about penalties and how severe they might be or not?
Sure. Well, let me say a few things. First of all of these restrictions are not meant to be gotchas for the students. They are designed based on our best judgment on what the public health requirements to keep us safe, because we cannot negotiate with the virus. It will not negotiate with us. Second, I can assure you, if you take a look at what some other schools like University of Illinois, I think Ohio State, others, they are outright suspending students for COVID violations. Straight up, first offense, gone. Whether it be people that are at frat parties that are oversubscribed or doing other sort of things. Not just sending them home to study remotely, but they are no longer in good standing with the university. We're not doing that. And I'm aware of the concern that our messaging has been exclusively negative and not a bit positive. I understand that critique. We are trying to be more positive. We have a communication that's going to go out next week that basically says, congratulations, we made it to hump day in the semester, and everyone's doing great, but we got to keep it up. We have, as I mentioned, clear and open communication with all the student leaders, and we invited them to be active participants in shaping how we respond to this crisis. But our approaches are dictated by the seriousness of this disease. And so with regard to specific questions, well, if I'm going to be at shenanigans and my parent just happens to be there, am I going to get in trouble? Or if the student's in a different room, whatever, let me say it like this. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. And everybody has a reason that is entirely legitimate, certainly to them, and maybe even just sort of on the facts, entirely legitimate, for why the nature of these restrictions might not apply to them in any particular circumstances at all. And if enough people start to think that way and act that way, we will not make it through. We won't. The virus will get hold here, it will catch hold, and it will spread, and we will have to evacuate. And that's not my conjecture. It's based on my observations of what's happening at other universities across the country. And so with regard to the specific question about visiting other rooms, no, they shouldn't be visiting other rooms until we have a QR code system up and running, and hopefully that'll be a matter of days. Proctors are on that. They're watching, and they're telling their charges on their floors of the way this has to go, as are the fraternity presidents in their fraternity houses. And if you happen to be in the village and your student happens to be in the village and you're 10 feet away and you do a nod and wink at each other, or somebody going to get in trouble, all I would just ask is, we are spending millions of dollars in excess and not passing that cost onto families. People like David Ships and Chef Rick are up hours and hours and hours throughout the day, into the night, over the weekends, making extraordinary efforts, not only to keep people here, but keep them comfortable and safe. All we ask is for your cooperation in return, so we can get through this together.
Thank you for that. This is a question I could probably just answer individually, but I think since we have a few minutes, other parents may have this same question. But if a student has to leave for a personal reason, like maybe a doctor's appointment, what is the protocol for that?
So the protocol is you tell the dean of students you need to leave, right? And for example, we have students that have some very particular medical issues that they have to go to CVS, have to get certain prescriptions and come right back and whatever. And we work with them and like make sure, like, look, going to your doctor does not mean you stop at Hardee's en route back, right? Get to go and you come right back. And so if they have a legitimate need like that, they'll please tell the dean of students. They'll adjudicate it and go from there.
Great. Well, we're getting a lot of positive comments on the Q&A. I just think we might have covered everything, and we're going to have these on a regular basis. So we've got one coming up in 2 weeks. And so it looks like there's still maybe some unanswered questions about spring semester, but we will just about timing. And, but so maybe that's something we can cover next time. And David or Chef Rick, do you have anything you want to add before I let the Vice Chancellor wrap it up?
Chef, I'll just pop in only to say thank you and to certainly thank you for the support and everything that you're doing to encourage what we're trying to do here. It is a monumental effort, but we do it because we are devoted to ensuring that your students have the best possible experience here. So thank you.
And I would just second what David said. We're very thankful for you and your understanding during this difficult time. And we are all in it together, and we will get through it together. And on the other side of this, you'll see a Sewanee that will be legend. It's pretty incredible what's happening here.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Vice Chancellor, for being here. And everybody have a good night and good rest of the week. And we miss seeing you and look forward to being together. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you all very much. Take care now. Bye-bye.